Hey everybody, and welcome to the Holotapes Weekly Podcast. This episode does not have a number because it is a special episode. First off, I want to say hello. My name is Jordan, and I'll be your host for today. This is my co-host, Jordan.
Hello.
And today, we are going to be having a very special interview with Mr. Wade K. Savage, an acclaimed director, award-winning director for his short, The Owl, and also the fantastic director of the Fallout Lanius short film. Hello, Mr. Wade.
Thank you very much, Jordan, for having me on.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on, you know? It's great to get more people who have done a lot for the community in here and to hear your voices and hear what you have to say. So, you want to just hop right into this interview?
Yeah, well, look, in saying that, thanks so much. And I think to any of the fans of either Holotapes or Fallout listening, it's a huge thanks because I care deeply for the Fallout community, and I think it's a really great community, and it's been a very supportive community. So it's lovely to be here to chat.
Well, I'm glad that you're happy to be here. So let's just go ahead and hop in here. So, Wade, we know that you have worked on quite a few different projects, and I think the one that you have the most acclaim for right now is The Owl, which was just, from what I've seen of it, I haven't gotten a chance to watch the whole thing, but it was very, very moving, even in just the short that I did see of it. Now, can you tell us exactly how did you get into the filmmaking writing business?
Sure. Well, I basically went to what you American guys would call technical college. So it's a very basic style of university, which is all hands-on. And I actually trained as a film editor, and that's kind of a bit of my day job. I'm a film editor by trade, but I've always wanted to direct and produce. So from there on, I just started producing and directing short-form films, and I've been doing that for a long while. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've been working with a great director in his own right, a guy called Peter Gabriel, and we made 2 films together. Our first film together was The Owl, which was a very low-budget, extremely heavy urban drama. And then our latest film we did was a film called Barrow, which is a kind of a police thriller forensics kind of film. So that's the latest one. And in that time, of course, I've been a huge gamer, like a lot of gamers, since I was a very little boy, and I've especially loved the Fallout series because it combines all these different aesthetics and mechanics that I really love. So yeah, it was, I had a super blue-collar upbringing, growing up in a small country town, and filmmaking was like a great escape. And even now, I live in a city called Perth in Western Australia. We're not a big entertainment capital, so it's still a very tricky, though exciting environment to be in as an artist and a filmmaker.
Yeah, high risk, high reward is kind of where as it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's great that you started out as sort of this editor, which I think is really what me, Jordan, and Monty have really had to start as well, as we just do a lot of the editing and stuff. And so it's nice to hear that, so people who start out just like we do, and really anyone who just takes the time to learn things about editing can really get into the business and get further. And to be honest, it's quite incredible where you started and where you are now.
Yeah, well, look, editing is so important. I mean, I've only had a really, like, a dalliance with the kind of whole YouTube thing, but YouTubers, at the end of the day, are kind of voice performers and editors. So, and if they're good editors, I think they make better content rather than being good directors. So, editing is super important. And the people that have supported me most in my career have been editors. They haven't been producers, and they haven't necessarily been directors either. It's other editors I've known who've looked after me. So, it's a wonderful craft, and I think it's a undervalued craft at times.
It absolutely is, absolutely. And a lot of us editors, sometimes we don't get the accolades that we deserve. Oh, I can't speak today. So, tell us, which one of your films is your favorite, and can you give us a why on that?
Of my films?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Look, I'm really proud of Barrow, and I know we're kind of talking in a film that's only just done the festival market. It only opened at the Irvine International Film Festival in California like a month ago. Yeah. So it's really, really early on. I think technically, in terms of performance, and a lot of that is Peter Gabriel, because he's a creative colleague in this, and I might have directed it, but we co-wrote it. And it's it's got all these technical things about it, which I'm really happy with. It's got really great performers. And yeah, I'm really pleased with the look of it. It's a really kind of mature, exciting look at this young woman who's like a forensic entomologist, and she's trying to kind of piece together the night her father murdered her mother, and it does get a bit kind of like science fiction meets horror. It's a bit, it's hard to explain without ruining it, but it's the biggest budget I had. It was $30,000, which is a lot of money for a short film, and at the same
Yeah.
time, it's no money, but it depends on how you look at it. And yeah, so I think I'm most proud of that. And but if you're talking about experience, I'd say I'm most proud of surviving Fallout Lanius.
Yeah,
In
it
terms of
definitely.
like films, I go, man, I'm so happy we made it through, and we made it, and people were pretty happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely seems like you've really got these darker films definitely down pat, and that's sort of
Yeah,
your style for the most part.
yeah,
And
that's right, right.
I know that that's Jordan's favorite genre. Isn't that right, Jordan?
Horror,
Yeah.
dark horror. Yeah, you know what? I personally love dark horror, but not at late hours
Sure, sure, yeah.
or
We won't be
anything
watching.
that involves like the
Anything.
elder gods of any form. Not about
Oh
those
yeah,
tentacle monsters.
yeah. Okay. You're not watching Martyrs at 2 a.m. or anything like that.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
no, absolutely not.
um, yeah. Sorry. Go on.
So getting on to our main topic, which is Fallout Linnaeus. Where did the inspiration for that really start?
Well, I think it was probably two things. It was having to get out some kind of creative relationship to gaming. I think it always comes from that fandom element. And it's the same, and at the core, it's probably the same reason why people cosplay or write fan fiction or make fan films. And, I saw bits and pieces which are on YouTube. Like I'm a huge fan of Nuke Break, and like I know Zach on like Twitter and stuff, and they've done really crazy stuff. And a part of me was like, look, we could do something like that here in Australia. And I love the Fallout series since the first one. I'm one of those guys that played the ones in the late '90s. And I thought I can do this story, but it's really tricky because we won't be able to do 50s aesthetics meeting science fiction kind of installations, and we just don't have that stuff in Australia. We definitely don't have that kind of stuff in Perth anymore because we went through a big boom where we destroyed a lot of our old buildings, so everything's quite modern and ugly here. So I kind of went, oh, okay, the Legion's really interesting. And we've got some really crazy landscape here in Australia. I'm not sure if it's a perfect match for Arizona, but we definitely gave it a crack. And I thought, when it comes to that kind of material, you want it to look as best as it can, and you don't want to overreach. Like I knew we wouldn't be able to do robots and ghouls and super mutants, and because even when you've got a lot of money, that still can look really rubbish. So I thought if it's just people in a space and there's a bit of drama, then I think I can do that. And even then, like making combat look good is really tricky. So at the end of the day, it was about doing something quite achievable that hopefully people liked, and we didn't overreach and screw it up.
Yeah, and I mean, your settings and costuming were absolutely beautiful, and it didn't even cross my mind that there would be an issue with it. So.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
at all.
thank you. Thank you. That's all. The costumes in general is a woman called Elena Starcevich, and she's a wonderful kind of like upcoming production designer. And she works so hard on every project she does. She takes a 6-month break in between each one, basically. And I hope she doesn't mind me saying that, but because she kind of like kills herself and then goes, okay, I'm out, and then comes back and then she's like, okay, let's do it again, and then she's like, okay, I'm out. She kind of does this kind of which you have to do, because she handmade like every costume barring Lanius, which is partly a guy called John Tolliday, and with help from a young woman called Dan Shear. But John Tolliday at Velvet Worm did a majority of that armor, and everything's handcrafted, of course. I don't think there was any, we didn't do any 3D printing or anything like that. There was no. There wasn't. Oh, sorry, I tell a lie. We did some stuff with the promo show for Pip-Boy, which we did purchase, but I don't know if that'll see the light of day. It's kind of sitting on the cutting room floor at the moment.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and as for stepping back for a second, as for the setting, you're concerned about Australia not quite looking like Arizona. If you were, unless you were looking really closely and you knew the types of plants that you were showing and things like that, there was no way that you could tell the difference. Having been to Arizona and having driven through it quite a bit, I mean, there was no difference.
Oh, good. I remember seeing some really nice comments on YouTube, and I know that sentence doesn't make sense. really nice comments on YouTube. But honestly, we had high 90s, I think, percentage of positive comments on YouTube. And a couple of people were like, oh, yeah, you shot this at so-and-so in Arizona, right? Like, obviously, a couple of comments saying, oh, yeah, this is in Arizona. And I remember saying, no, this is Western Australia. This is nowhere near.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's just incredible. All that costuming, all the scenery, it just came together so well. And even though there are some points where you can say we can nitpick and be like, oh yeah, this could have been a little bit better, this could have been a little bit better.
Oh, yeah.
Overall, the film was 10 out of 10.
No, thank you. That's very kind.
So it really is. It blew my mind the first time I saw it. Even my fiance, who has never touched a video game in her life, I showed it to her, and she thought it was fantastic. She wanted to know all about the game just because she saw the film. And when you can draw people in like that, it really says a lot about your ability, about your team's ability, about everyone who worked on it, and that's just something really incredible.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, look, that kind of commentary means a lot because, we try to do our absolute best. And there's always, filmmaking is always a matter of kind of compromise and financial restrictions and time and all that kind of thing. So it's wonderful to hear that. And I think at the end of the day, if fans are happy, if you're a Fallout New Vegas fan or a Fallout fan in general, and especially if you're a Legion fan, like that's your faction in New Vegas, then if we've made you happy, I think that's quite cool.
Absolutely. So now, what would you say was the biggest challenge? What was the thing that you had to focus on the most when it came to this film?
I think probably getting combat to look right. And the big lesson learned is to not rely on CGI. Like, we had a really great CGI guy, and it's just so hard to make that stuff work. And like shooting combat is really, really tricky. I directed the Owl 4 or 5 months before Fallout Lanius, and that was just people talking in rooms, And I kind of said that to Johnny Domino, and Johnny Domino, like he's wonderful to work with, but he's the biggest troll, He's really kind of funny, and I said to him, before we shot this, man, I just did a film people talking in rooms. And he said, yeah, I noticed. He'd always give me shit, like, all the time. And, like, when you coverage, like, we're shooting 2 cameras, we're shooting red footage, so they're big, expensive cameras. We've got 3 or 4 people hanging off them. We're shooting, lots of track work. And we're shooting in this big cavern, so you lose sunlight as soon as the sun hits either side of the cavern. We had to come back and shoot stuff. Some of the hits didn't work, so I think some of the editing became quite cutty at the end. So some of it works, some of it doesn't. And we had 3 months of combat training. Kaneda Cruz was the fights designer who did a really good job, and it was my first time working with a fight designer, choreographer. And it's a really big job, and also I was really obsessive with like how everyone looked, the physique of everyone, and he had all kinds of people to help out, and sometimes I had to say, look, I don't want that person in shot because they just don't look right, and they could be an incredible martial artist or whatever. So it's just, you're fighting aesthetics, you're fighting training, you're fighting time.
Yeah.
But definitely making combat look good, I think, was a big one. I think it was quite hot at the time we shot, but I don't think that was the biggest problem. But everything kind of played down to like combat. So you'd be shooting a scene and then something would break, or someone would kind of like be puffed out, tired, or thirsty. The armor, the Lanius's armor, like that was like Johnny couldn't actually like see half the time.
It didn't look like it.
No, yeah, he couldn't see. He couldn't sit. It got so hot at times he'd nearly pass out and not tell us, because he's an ex like MMA champion, and he's a strong man in real life, so he's very, very physical, but he's also very, very stubborn. So
yeah.
And it wasn't actually shooting in the sun. It was actually times when we were shooting in the studio, doing the kind of throne room inside the tribal tent, and we'd shot all of that. And he was like, "Oh wow, I nearly passed out then." And I kind of said, "What are you talking about? What? Why didn't you tell us?" He goes, "No. If I would have told you, you would have pulled me out of the armor. We'd have to reset. We'd have to shoot it again." So he said, "I just sat there with the little black stars popping in and out of my eyes, and I didn't pass out." Oh God.
If for our listeners who are here, if you do not know who Johnny Domino is, just type his name on Google. You will see him pop up. The man is a monster. And you can absolutely tell that he is the kind of guy that will not back down from a challenge.
No. You probably may even see him in very little clothing as well, because he's done all kinds. He does like burlesque performances and stuff. Like he's
Wow.
Well, like yeah. Well, he does. I think he was like he's got a very varied career. He was like the winner of Boylesque or something. So he's this gruff, kind of scary guy who does like MMA and wrestling, but then he does a lot of fringe performances as well in Australia. Like he really just doesn't give a shit. He's that kind of guy. So if you think he's kind of handsome and you want to see like bare flesh, I'm sure you'll find it. And Johnny just has zero shame. So look hard enough, and you will find it. I have no doubt.
Well, getting back on topic a little bit, away from the very handsome, hey, Johnny Domino, call me sometime, by the way. No, in all honesty, I mean, I can definitely see where combat would definitely be a challenge.
So tricky.
And Jordan, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but it definitely looked very 300-esque.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I mean, that's, some people will criticize 300 and will probably similarly criticize, follow Lanius and say, oh, it looks kind of cheesy and fake. Well, that's kind of the point, is that you want it to look so over the top that viewers can get really into it. And you can kind of, it's the action that you're looking for. It's not always realism, which you did capture quite well, but a lot of it was just so entertaining in and of itself.
That's great, yeah. I'm glad, because 300 is a huge reference, especially when it came to like the CGI and stuff, which is still really, a big bugbear for me. But 300, so if you can't go realistic, which is hard and requires a lot of money with different aesthetics and especially makeup work for a lot of the blood stuff, so then you have to go stylized, and I think that was the kind of idea we were aiming for.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of challenges, did you have any problems with ZeniMax, who is notoriously litigious when it comes to anything having to do Fallout? Did you have any issues whatsoever?
No, they were really, really good to deal with. I dealt with them through the Bethesda community manager, and I think, I've seen this problem happen time and time again in the fan scene, or anyone using anyone else's IP, and so, I've worked as a I've been a filmmaker and I've worked in the industry for about 10 years, and I shake my head every time at it. But before I even bothered, I think, to write the script, I contacted Bethesda. I laid out what I wanted to do. I laid out the fact we're going to do crowdfunding. I mean, evidently the Nuka Break guys had set precedents because they'd already done crowdfunding, this, that, and the other. So I knew there was a chance they'd be okay with it. But every time we did really anything, I would ask Bethesda. Like, there was never like, they weren't going to have some kind of like, marketing assistant come across a website and be like, oh, look, they're doing a fan film. Well, I better type up the cease and desist. Like, there's no opportunity for that. And they were really great to deal with. And the reality is that, I know there's this huge gray area, especially with YouTubers, and I know this new media and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's someone else's IP, so it's best to ask. And I've given that advice to a lot of filmmakers. I think there was these guys who did a really great Manhunt short film here, and at the end of the day, Rockstar wouldn't sign off on it. So it was just like such a bummer. But I think they shot it. Like, I think they'd done some work on it. So it's like, don't get yourself in that. It just ask. It's not
chickens before they hatch, kind of thing.
Absolutely. And like some people are like, oh, it's better to ask for forgiveness than there's permission. And it's like, well, not really, because in this instance, you could blood, sweat, and tears into something, create it, put it up, and then they'll just Nintendo you, and that'll be it. It'll never see the light of day.
Exactly.
So it's you have to ask. You just have to ask.
And I'm glad to hear that. And you said that you were working a lot with Bethesda, and if you guys didn't know, Mitch Lewis, who actually does the voice of Lanius in the actual game, was actually the voice of Lanius in the film. And it's kind of hard to tell because you guys do such a good job of matching up the mouth movements and keeping his mouth off screen when he does need to speak. So how was it that you managed to convince Mitch Lewis to work with you guys on this?
Well, basically, I did a lot of research on Mitch, and I was able to find his agent in LA, which was always fun because it's like 12-hour difference or whatever between there and here. So then I started a bunch of phone calls where I was calling his agency, which was one of those really huge agencies made up of thousands of people and hundreds of staff. And so I just kind of went department to department until I got his agent. His agent was really good to deal with. The trickier part was dealing with the Screen Actors Guild because there was all this paperwork we had to do. And in the end, they were quite helpful. Eventually, at first, it was really tricky, and there was a lot of paperwork to sign and this and that and the other. But look, everyone was kind of good to deal with at the end. And so I just kind of bugged him, and we got in touch and we chatted about it, and I told him that I'd been speaking to the guys at Obsidian about this first. We'd okayed it with Bethesda, and then by that stage, I'd basically built a little bit of a rapport with Mitch. So then I was kind of at the end of it just dealing directly with Mitch, who's an absolutely lovely guy. Like, he is so nice to give his time to this little fan film over in Australia. And he was just such a pro, like such a pro. Like, we did one session with him. That's all we did for all his dialogue. I mean, it's like 8 lines or something. But it was good to do that, and I think we did that before we shot. So Johnny was just kind of doing Mitch's lines on set, which doesn't leave a lot of room for error. You just have to get it right on the day, which is a weird way to shoot, because you'd think maybe you do it in terms of you do it like ADR, but I think there wasn't a tremendous amount of money to work with, and so even in what money we did have, Mitch was good enough to kind of accommodate us. And yeah, it was just great working with such a pro, and I loved his work throughout that game. He obviously makes the character. That's part of the reason people either really love Lanius or really hate him. Because of that incredible voice, and it was a huge boon just to have him involved. And I was, at one stage I was going to write some other characters and try to get their voice actors involved, but I couldn't get access to them, and I couldn't even get through the front door on some of them because their agents just wouldn't get back to me, and time was running out.
Yeah, I completely understand on that one, and it's incredible that you managed just to get the one to work with you, and it's great that it sort of went over fairly easy. I know that especially when working with someone over an international boundary, it can get a bit tricky. I mean, Jordan, who currently lives in Germany, we've had a few issues with doing things internationally there. So I can't even imagine how hard it would have been to do working with the agency and everything else. That must have been absolutely difficult.
Yeah, it was tricky. It was tricky at first, and then we got into the groove. So that was good. I mean, it's really tricky dealing with these big organizations because, like, if anything goes wrong and there's some issue, it'll all just kind of collapse in on itself. And a lot of it was just the same way I'd kind of treat Bethesda. Is like, I just tell them, this is what we're doing, this is what's happening. There's no surprises. You just keep them aware of it, and if they're aware of it and their client's happy, then I think you'll always have a good experience, and be very clear of your expectations. And they could have just said no from the onset. They just could have said, look, my client's not going to do it. He's not going to want to do that for this very small amount of money we're offering. But the agent was good enough to say, okay, sure, I'll ask Mitch. And then Mitch, of course, was lovely and more than happy to do it. So it's, someone needs to champion you within an organization to get any kind of access to these kind of performers.
Yeah. Now, I know that for a bit of the movie, you did work with some of the other Fallout development teams, correct? So can you tell us about their involvement and, how much of it did they help you with writing and things like that, and with the background lore?
Well, the main thing I did before I started writing the script, I didn't really want to bug them with reading the scripts, and I also wanted to be a kind of surprise for them, but I made sure to hit up both Chris Avallone and John Gonzalez, who played a big role in writing Lanius and creating the Legion. It was mainly John Gonzalez, I believe, who created him and wrote a bit of him, and I think Chris was involved too. I'm sure it was John mainly. Excuse me. So I kind of said, the big question with Lanius is what's his actual origin story, because everyone says, he grew up within the Legion, and then the story about the Hydebarks and, all these different things, because he's kind of like, in reality, he's made up of many myths, and that's the whole, that's his power, because he's like, he's invulnerable and he shoots lasers and, that kind of stuff. It's that ancient kind of style of like how you create your boogeyman. But as close as I could get it, the Hydebark origin story, as far as John told me, was the closest thing to an origin story, wherein he was the great kind of like ruthless killer of the Hydebarks, and then the Hydebarks basically gave up and he started wasting them, and Caesar said, hey, you're an asset and I can use you, and that was basically the closest thing to canon. So I think the film is, as far as it's concerned, it's canon in that regard, but Lanius is always supposed to be a little bit of a myth and a legend. That's kind of where his power comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can definitely all agree that him being faceless makes him infinitely more scary within the world, within the universe of Fallout. And I think that anyone in that same kind of space where you can say, I don't really know who this person is, makes them infinitely more terrifying.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think, and I think the guys at Obsidian, guys and girls at Obsidian are very detail focused. So it is interesting that when you do kill him, you take his helmet off and his face is fine. So it's who knows? Who knows? Maybe it's all bullshit. Maybe the whole, having his face hammered and all that kind of stuff is a big lie just to build him up, to build his legend up.
Yeah, and I think we've discussed it on the podcast before. If not, I know we've discussed it a few times just between in the team that there was the possibility that Lanius had actually died quite a while ago, and that he had just been replaced by several different people over time. But the myth is what came of it.
That's right. That's a good idea. It's like that constant replacement of your boogeyman to keep everyone afraid and keep your morale up.
Yeah.
Which I can nearly believe if he wasn't such a pain to kill when you fight him, because the guy is like, I mean, unless your character's stacked just the right way. But I think pretty sure the first time I fought him, he killed me twice.
Yeah, at least twice. Yeah.
I think I've said this about 1,000,000 times before, but I've never had that problem. I always play on very easy.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. I think I finished it on normal. Pretty sure normal.
So it definitely makes it a bit more difficult.
Yes.
So coming to the end of this, what are you working on now? Is there anything that you can tell us?
Well, I basically, whilst Barrow does the festival run, for the last 2 years I've been working on a kids series, which is weird when we're talking about the start of this piece, you saying that most of my work is quite dark, and this piece is definitely not as dark, but it's the most I can say about it at this point is it's Goonies meets Pokemon in a post-apocalyptic setting. This kind of the show we're looking to create, and it's 6 to 11-year-olds, so it's a bit younger than the kind of violence and kind of extreme kind of drama stuff I've been doing for the last 10 years or so. And we're looking to create like a big IP, like a real world that people can connect with, and we'd hope to do gaming in the future, and we're writing a TV series for animation, and it'll be quite different to the kind of stuff I've done in the past, but I think it's going to have such a big audience, and I'm really excited about creating something for a big audience. But at the same time, I've learned time and time again that doesn't have to be a terrible thing, because it's always about quality. It's always about creating good ideas, and so long as you're inspired by things that are very, very high quality. Like just recently I've been watching just so much Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like that's just such a fantastic show. So if you're inspired by good kids TV, and there's not a lot of it, let's be really, really honest about it, then hopefully you can produce good kids TV. And there's going to be heaps of kind of fallout influences in this, because I like the idea of throwing in other ideas from stuff that I enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds really incredible. Just the idea of having a kid show Pokemon a post-apocalyptic mix just sounds like the perfect show, honestly. And I think we're all very excited to see what that holds. And honestly, I'll watch it.
Great.
Yeah, I probably will too, honestly.
Oh, good. So long as it sounds good. And, we're working very hard on producing something quite special. Like we've just recently we did a development lab here in Australia about producing ideas for digital, and I got a lot of really great feedback. I've got a really great professional mentor from LA who's really excited about the project. So it's moving along at its own little pace. And, if I'd love if it was something Fallout fans could enjoy, because it will have that kind of post-apocalyptic element to it, but have a lot of these kind of hopefully really fun elements to it as well.
Well, good. I'm very, very happy. And I did have one thing that Monty, who couldn't be here today, wanted to tell you, and he wanted to tell you that he will pay anything in order to have you make another Fallout fan film based on the Burnt Man.
Well, that was... I'll tell you now, that probably would have been the plan next afterwards, and that's why we had that tease
at the end, because we wanted to go down that road. But I think what happened was that we had a really great response to Lanius, and I really, really enjoyed the process. But crowdfunding is hard, and I felt pretty burned, just energy-wise, and it was really expensive. Like, the amount of money, I couldn't tell you how much money I put into Fallout Lanius, like thousands upon thousands of dollars, because part of the problem is that like our biggest audience for Fallout was in the US, and sending stuff to you guys just kills us. Like
you know, like, and what would happen is that we had all our budgets together for Lanius in terms of postage, but then someone broke a light, and so that was it. That was
Man.
that was someone broke a light on like the last day of shooting, and so if you know anything about film equipment, it's times 10 of everyday stuff. So it's like, well, there's the postage budget. I guess Wade's paying for it, or who, you know, Stuart McKenzie, our producer, you know, like, it's, oh well, we're reaching into our pockets on this. So I would love to come back to the universe, and I think I'd come back to the universe. I think with a decent budget and maybe a little pat on the head from Obsidian or Bethesda, of them kind of coming to us and saying, hey, how about you guys do this and we'll support you, and rather than like it being grassroots and that kind of thing. And so I'd definitely come back to it in time if I could. But and also the big thing that I took away from it was that you've got very limited you've got limited creative control, which is fine, but you've got very limited ways you can kind of profit's the wrong word, but you can't. The return is very limited.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
like the fact that you make people very happy. That's excellent. And I'm always audience based, but like in terms of like, you know, career stuff, it was just really just a bit tricky. So I kind of said, okay, all right, well, this is what I've learned from Lanius. Let's make a great big series. That's you know, we can still use that audience and chat to people and hopefully get them excited about it. But you need that ownership. You need to own the IP. You know, if it fails or if it succeeds, it's on you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I think that we can all agree with you that it really comes down to, even though as much as we want to just make the audience happy, it comes down to how is this going to allow me to further, not even in terms of money, but even my, you know, your career, your abilities,
right.
your skills. In some way, there has to be some sort of return, and if there's not, it becomes a very, very hard process of continuing.
Yeah. So tell Monty I'm sorry. Tell Monty I'd do it if they threw money at me. I don't necessarily want to spend fans' money either. Like if someone at Bethesda or Obsidian just suddenly just woke up with a pile of cash and said, "Oh, let's do this film about a character from 2010." You know, I'm sure everyone's thinking about that guy, and which is even the weirdest thing about doing stuff about New Vegas, because that was 2013. It's like 3 years after the boat launched. But you know, I spent last year. I spent a lot of time talking to Machinima and all these kind of MCNs, and it's a honeycomb of everyone promising nothing they'll ever deliver. So it's a fascinating thing. But yeah.
So
one day.
One day. Very, very hopefully. You know, and I'm going to say it one more time that we're all very, very excited to hear more about your future projects, and we're definitely going to be keeping a lookout, and maybe we can even have you on maybe a little bit later on down the road, and we'll do another interview once you have maybe a little bit of your new series set up, and we'll talk more.
I'd love it. It'll launch this year. It'll launch this year.
Oh, wonderful.
It'll be announced and it'll launch. The series won't launch, but definitely we'll be launching content and the IP this year. So help me God.
Oh, well, that's definitely a good thing. And we're all definitely looking forward to it, and we'll definitely keep an eye out and make sure that we keep up all of the support that we can for you. And so, you know, I think we're just going to wrap up here. And, you know, before we go, is there anything that you would like to just tell anyone who's trying to get into the arts or into filmmaking or anyone like that? Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, I will say that it's kind of what you said early on. It's high risk, high reward. So do it. You know, the main reason you should want to do it is definitely not fame or money, because that's a long way. You know, that's a long kind of sad road. But if you want to produce great art, if you want to make your audiences happy and produce just great entertainment, then just be aware that it's a hard slog, and you should be looking at creating, going into any kind of art form, especially if it's film and TV, with an actual craft under your belt. Producing and directing is really fantastic, but it's you know, it's really tricky to develop, because you can only develop those skills when you're actually doing it. So my major advice is create great art and just keep doing it. Don't get involved in anything external to the process. Just keep creating great work and study, keep learning, watch great content. You know, you're going to be developing your craft until the day you die. Like, you know, there's so many kind of like quotes from like people like Martin Scorsese saying, "I learn something new in every film I make," you know, and that's true. That's absolutely true, because those guys who are considered masters, you know, Stanley Kubrick, you know, whoever, like there's you know, there's all these notes from them saying, "Oh, I learned that this camera lens or this performance note," or it's all about the constant development. But do it for the right reasons, because it's tricky.
I would definitely agree. I mean, and we've been doing this for quite a few months now, and we've definitely seen where every single step along the way we learn something new. So I think that that's a great message to everyone out there, is just remember that doing it for the right reasons and learning along the way are the most important parts.
Absolutely.
So as for that, make sure that you go and follow Wade K. Savage on Twitter at Wade K. Savage. Make sure you go and watch the Fallout Lanius video, which you can click this annotation over here, and you can click on that. You can watch it and love it. You can click over here to subscribe to us. You can click over here to go to the playlist that is all of the Holotapes weekly episodes. And I think that's about it. Am I missing anything, guys?
No, I don't think so.
Alrighty,
Announce Fallout 4.
Announce Fallout 4. So thank you so much for joining me, Wade. And Jordan, thank you so much for joining me as well. And hopefully everyone out there who's listening, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.